Can I just say something? Yeah, can I just suggest something? This is fantastic, the amount of people here, and I don't know if my fellow candidates would be fine, and I know there's time limits, but you know, there's about 10 cards there, and you know, we've talked a lot, but we haven't had a room full of folks like this for a while, so I'd be fine with staying, and if you guys are okay.
Where's Leslie? We need to know about the janitor requirements at BJM and what. We're good.
Good. Okay.
All right. Would you like me just to read some of these?
Yes.
8 years ago, my African-American son, who was at Bell Sherman, first grade, asked me, "Mom, why are all the black boys getting in trouble at school?" What would you tell him, and how can we address this issue?
I think that if I were a parent, I would have to repeat that question to the people at the school. I mean, whether it's to start with the teacher and the principal, or maybe the principal. Because someone has to know that you know, a child, that's coming from a child's mouth, so that, you know, that's like watching the movie. It's, you know, eye-opening, you know, or you know, things in the movie are eye-opening. That statement is has to be eye-opening for the teacher, because the teacher, I'm sure, doesn't think I am punishing the African American children more harshly or more frequently. They don't think they're doing that, and they don't intend to do it. But
So
they have to hear
I think if you back the question up a little bit and look at the structure of school, the way we have school structured, and whether that's appropriate for young people, and which young people does it work best for, and which young people does it not work best for, and what do we need to change about the structure of schooling, of how we educate our young people, so that it works for everybody.
I always kind of marvel about how many of my young clients are on Ritalin and other medications, and you know, I always wonder, are we expecting kids to be sitting in a classroom for 6 hours a day? Is that what kids should be doing, especially the younger ones? And you know, I know that doesn't really answer why the African American kids are being called out more, but I do agree with that. You know, our schooling system might not be serving our young people the way it should be.
And changing the classroom setup to focus on individual needs and how they learn, because not everybody learns in the same way. Some focus on sight learning, some focus and process better when they hear it. And so there could be different types of classrooms if we can try to determine the best way that a student learns. And it could be an informal situation where you're not sitting at a desk for 6 hours and not moving, and you can have the freedom to move around the classroom with what your daily curriculum is.
When I was in elementary school in the 70s, they were doing an experiment called the open classroom. I don't know if anyone is familiar with that, but I was a child of the open classroom, and it was 2 classrooms together, and we would work in groups. And you would rotate your groups, and I think some of the things might have been organized by ability level, but one of the functions was to make sure the kids had contacts with different groups and you know, got together with different people, but you weren't sitting at a desk. You were sitting in a reading area. You were sitting on a rug. You were outside playing, and it was a very modern approach. I think it served me well. I don't know if it's popular among educators or even possible these days, but maybe it is. Maybe it's something we need to reconsider.
What about the power of the courts to positively impact the criminalization of people of color by monitoring more closely how sentencing and other processes are handed down, including bail, bonds, how much time, comparative, like, is there actually a comparative analysis going on in the courts for your own self about the sentencing being handed down to white criminals of the same crime as black people or other people?
Is this research being done?
The Office of Court Administration does keep statistics. They're really hard to find when you search the website. I don't know. I don't have an answer to that, but that's probably a good thing to look for and a good thing to insist upon from our elected officials, that, you know, especially on the state level, that OCA keep those statistics. And I think that's important. You know, one thing I notice is I think Kelly was saying something along these lines is, when someone is held pre-trial or given high bail, it's done on a one-by-one basis. So as a lawyer, you have a handful of clients, they're, various races, and you're not really keeping the statistics in your head. Generally, what I noticed is that people were denied bail or given high bail if they didn't have a stable place to go. Maybe we need to reach out further into the community to redefine what it means to have a stable place to go.
And recent shooting cases in Enfield Town Court, there are 2 shooting cases, one's a white man, one's a black man. I read the journal, I read what was said, and the case with the black man, the level of fear in the language, the response in that, that he's described as an inner city black man from the Bronx. His list of charges are there, and, he shot a person, that person didn't die. Then there's the case with the white man who is, shot his sister's boyfriend and killed him, who's charged with manslaughter. The disparities in their bail and bond is enormous, and it's obvious. And the language in the news reports, the sister is in there talking about how this is just a bunch of foolishness and nonsense, and the level of fear and the level of alarm is not there.
And this actually is something that a committee locally has been talking with OCA, who oversees the justice courts, because the initial bail determination is in the local criminal courts. And we have an oversight committee now because bail is being misused, and it's being misused daily, and it is usually misused surrounding whether you have a stable place to stay, whether you vary in criminal history or in race from that of the community, or honestly that of some of the judges. It is a problem. It is a problem that the attorneys, I know we've been battling this as long as we've been practicing, but it is something that the state is monitoring and trying to fix within the justice courts by having oversight of these individual justice courts that are misusing bail far too often. And it is something that, as the attorney coming in, you have to focus on and fight, because it is happening. You are absolutely correct. And it is something that we're trying to change, but we need more assistance from the higher powers on the state level.
And also, it's important that this is made known. When someone gets bail set at a local criminal court, that they're entitled to just about an immediate bail review by the county court judge. And, that's, as I said, one of us is going to be county court judge. It's important to know. I want to know if people, feel that bail is being set based on race. It's important for the community to come out and talk about what they see and what they know and what they experience, and give some hard statistics. So I'm going to put it on the community, and I'm going to say in this room and say, let us know, talk about the newspaper articles you read, talk about friends or people you've experienced.
Okay, so what are the avenues available to regular citizens to have access to the judges, to give them that kind of information? Is anything because that's putting the requirement on an individual in the community who's really upset about something,
Right,
to take the initiative to call a stranger who's in a position of power,
right,
and say, look, this wasn't fair. But what could be set up that would be a more structural solution?
What kind of court watch system do we have going on? I know when I moved to Tompkins County in 1995, we had a court watch system. And I know it was led in large part by people who were looking out for victims of domestic violence. But, perhaps, getting community volunteers to the local criminal courts when they have, court appearances. They're once a week. The district attorneys usually go once a month. Maybe.
So a court watch system is what exactly?
It's people who go to the court. It's public. You can appear in court and hear what happens, and keep statistics. And you don't have to call the judge every single time. But as a community, a group in the community who keeps track of what's going on in our community, because we need to see this. As I said, everything is happening one by one case at a time. And, I've seen white people go to jail on high bail, and I've seen African-American people and, other races go to jail on high bail. But, you don't keep the numbers in your heads. I don't have a running tally.
Well, one thing I'm hearing you say is that if we had that information, if somebody was keeping tabs and doing that research, and we knew those numbers and they were public, that would begin to influence the system.
But
So-
They have that responsibility. I mean, it's not, they have similar crimes, by the way, but their crimes are different. One of them is actually a manslaughter case, the person is dead. The other one is an assault. Both are horrible, both are unacceptable, both should be punished, but they should be punished equally in our judicial system, and you as going for a county court judge should have that absolutely on your radar and make yourself responsible, because it's not.
Right, the community should expect the local defense bar to always, and I think that's what you're talking about, Kelly, is nothing more frustrating when you leave a bail hearing and you know it was arbitrary compared to the last time you had a bail hearing in front of even the same judge. And it's not necessarily something that, again, that was intended, but you do have to ask the higher court judge. And I recall always being successful on those, because if you do them at the right times, you'll be successful because they know you're not just doing it every time. For the community the community can expect that. As far as the way it's reported in the paper, that is something the community can do. People can contact the editors and say, take a look at these two things. And if enough people do that, then you're going to have a response from the papers. But it is harder for the community to get through the walls of the court system, or it's harder than to contact a newspaper.
It is, but there's two agencies. Yes.
Even if you're working within the criminal justice system as a non-official, as for example, an offender aid restoration, you can't just call a judge.
Right, and I was going to say, we do have two agencies that you can call. One is Offender Aid and Restoration. The other is the Assigned Counsel Program, who then contact the attorney. I get calls from OAR every couple of days about concerns that are being brought to me on a specific case. So we do have two agencies you can call to let them know you're seeing this disparity, and then it really falls to the attorney, because OAR can't walk in and talk to the judge. The judges don't let that happen. And so the attorneys have to be involved on a basic level and in communication with all the agencies that are hearing what's going on.
And you certainly can't contact a judge about an individual case, about a specific case, because it's what's called an ex parte communication, and nobody can talk to the judge about that case. But I think every judge would be interested in trends and being part of the community.
Experience in this county.
Well,
How would you set up a structure that would allow you to gather information about trends?
Right.
You could-
There's
you could
another
do it as
issue that I'm hearing in here that I'd like to raise, which is the concern for public safety about who gets to go out on bail and who gets incarcerated. But the question is, which public exactly are we talking about? Who are we trying to protect from whom when we talk about public safety? And if the impact of this disproportionality and people being incarcerated, people of color being more heavily incarcerated than white people, that public is not being kept in safety. There's an enormous amount of damage done to not just that individual, but also their family and also their whole community and their whole congregation and all the rest of us in Tompkins County, realizing that this disparity exists. There's an enormous amount of damage that's done in the name of, quote, public safety. If we could think about which public we're trying to protect here, because of the prejudices that we have about who's dangerous and who's not dangerous.
Can I make a comment about this in statistics? Me and my friends have been teaching and studying the Department of Justice crime statistics for years. The federal crime statistics make it very clear. African Americans and Latinos perpetrate a much higher percentage of economic crimes than white people. Economic crimes are assaults where they hit you over the head and take your wallet, and drug crimes. That makes perfect sense because in the inner city, jobs are scarce. You need $3 to transact for that tomato. If those kids don't have it and no one is intervening in their work life, educating them and giving them skills so they can gain employment, they interact with those types of crime. Those statistics are clear. The thing that disturbs me is in this community, which is at least as much rural as it is urban, the disproportionate statistics of white men committing crime against sexual crimes against young people and property crimes is so astronomically disproportionate that every white woman should jump on a child when they see a white man coming. Right? That's not even part of the conversation. The conversation about who equals danger is the racist part of the conversation. You all understand it, right? When we see the fact that a kid has stolen a Snickers bar and is about to be sentenced on the cover of the Ithaca Journal, and we don't hear about the white person in the country who has sexually molested child after child after child, that's the disturbing part. It's not the activities. The data on the activities are absolutely clear. All right, let's make this simple. You want to stop economic crimes of young black men and young Hispanic men. The community needs to work on employment. I don't know the answer for what white people do, but we don't even talk about it.
It's on my mind all the time that petty larceny doesn't put children in danger for their life or their health when their parent commits petty larceny, but that domestic violence does, even when it's so-called minor domestic violence. I mean, those are the cases that you know we live in at the Department of Social Services, and the minor petty economic crimes that you're talking about, they don't even enter the radar. They're not even in our petitions most of the time. They can be as minor things, but no, you're absolutely right. It's the crimes against the family that are occurring in the home that destroy the community.
Well, and Joe, they may not be in your petitions, but they're being prosecuted. And a child who steals a $5 sandwich is being prosecuted the same as someone who steals, a $50 radio.
Like $2 billion maybe from Wall Street?
No,
Well,
they don't get prosecuted.
Yeah, they don't get prosecuted. They get a
I
pass.
forgot. Oh, sorry,
But
forgot. Yeah.
if we're going to fix this,
Right.
we have to fix it with the district attorney's office as well, because
Right.
they're prosecuting someone for a $5 candy bar the same as they process someone for a $250 crime. And half the time they expect that individual to plead to a misdemeanor when it's something, if it's your first offense, can be adjourned in contemplation of dismissal. You get 6 months to make sure you're staying out of trouble. And if we utilize that more here, we'd have less young people being convicted of petit larceny or attempted petit larceny because they're able to be given that chance. And it's not a fair use of that charge.
Another thing that, going along with what you're saying, Kelly, is, if you have a young adult stealing that candy bar or that, eyeliner was a case I once had, and there's a child with them, a 2-year-old in their cart at Target, then they get charged with endangering the welfare of a child. I mean, we have to be careful about that. How I always fail to see how that child is endangered, and we have to be careful of not throwing too many charges just to trump them up.
I would like to ask each of you, since we don't have a lot of time, what you can do personally. For example, you can talk about all the structural things that need to be done, and all of that. But you talk about the committees that get together and make a decision, this person yes, this person no, how about everybody, when you're in those committees, raising the question, would we look at this situation differently if it was a white child? Would we look at this situation differently if it was a black child? And don't be afraid to talk about it in these groups that are making these decisions. We can pretend we have a colorblind society. We don't. We're all part of this. We're all part of the problem. Right. Raising that question every single time and not worry about how it is with kids in elementary school. Yes, that's important, but what can I do as a potential judge, as a potential person sitting on the committee, as a person who has some consciousness about that? And I'm so frustrated because I find that lacking to reply to this conversation. Personal responsibility.
The Family Treatment Court team has 2 African American team members on it. And it's not uncommon for those questions that you asked to be asked. In other words, a self-examination by the team of are we acting in a way different here because this person is whatever race, or because they're a rural person or whatever it is. Those questions actually do get asked, the teams are not, they're filled with people who are bright and hardworking and who worry about those things. And I think it's fair for me to speak for everyone here that when I say that, I think that the judges should be expected to and will, and whoever's elected will react to that and always take that into account and be mindful of it. That's like I was saying, this is the first thing you have to do is just be, the constant self-assessment.
Well, we have to be watchdogs. As practicing attorneys handling cases, we have to be assessing whether that's a component. And if you don't make sure you're assessing if that's a component, you're missing the whole point of what we're talking about. And so as attorneys, we have to be the watchdogs, which is even more important as a judge, because if the attorney in front of you isn't checking that issue, you have to, sitting on the bench.
Could we set up something locally where the practicing attorneys in the county make a regular time to sit down with local community members and listen to stories?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Why couldn't we do that?
I think
We absolutely can.
that's a great idea.
I have a question about your humanity. Seth way back mentioned about your backpack. I'm concerned about unpacking your backpack. And my question to the three of you is, as a potential judge, what do you plan to do or have done about unpacking your own racism for yourself as an endangered species, from my perspective, as a man of color? What are you doing or will do to prevent you from performing your humanity to its fullest? So how do you unpack your racism and as you walk in your white privilege?
That's a good question.
I talk to people about race. That's like, it's something that wasn't always easy for me to do, but I talk to both white people and African American people and Latin American people about that stuff because it's kind of always fascinated me. And I studied anthropology in school, and I've just become more open about talking about it. And as time has gone on, I've become more comfortable talking about issues like, all the side issues that go along with it, not just race, but the, race and economics and society in general. And so, if you can do that, once you start doing that, you really, talk about unpacking the good and the bad, the good and the bad things. You start learning about yourself, and you start accepting that you weren't as, you were more, for me, more privileged than I ever realized I had been, and also more naive than I ever imagined myself to be too.
I think a lot of unpacking your backpack has to do with making personal connections and getting to know people.
Right.
And as I said earlier, I came here in 1995 and not even realizing how privileged. Well, realizing how privileged I was, but not even realizing the disparity that existed in this country. And then when I started representing people who were a little less fortunate, and then included a lot of people of color, and you make friendships. Even as an attorney, you get to know people. People lay their lives bare to you, and you start to see beneath the preconceived notions, and you learn that people are people. And I feel that has opened me up, and I want to continue to open up. I know I opened up this summer by watching Race, Power of an Illusion, and actually going to the talkbacks and just seeing how just tonight hearing Seth's perspective, and it continues to unpack, and I'm open to continue and dig deeper in there, and hopefully. I hope that in some way I use some of the privileges that I did have in a way to promote equality. And, again, I always believe I only have the power to do it on a case-by-case, a one-by-one basis, but I do want to make every person's life a little bit better who I touch. And, anytime, Tommy.
And so, Tommy, I would say that it is the community involvement. It is reaching out and talking to people. If it's an issue I'm not sure how to deal with, reaching out to the people who have dealt with the issue before or would recognize the signs that I don't see. You and I have talked about issues on many cases, a lot of whom involve DSS, and we continue to do that. And it's recognizing your own limitations on what you're perceiving, and if you aren't able to perceive an issue, seeking assistance of someone who can. And I think that's part of making sure that you are trying to lessen the ingrained racism that exists, so that moving forward, either you have the tools or you're working with someone who does, so that they can help you through.
Tommy, until you called me an endangered species, I was feeling good, but then I realized I'm the one African-American defense attorney in the whole county, and so maybe I am the last of the dodo birds, and I'm feeling kind of nervous at this point. But one of the scariest things that happens to me, and it shouldn't be scary, but it's happened probably 10 to 15 times, is I'll have typically someone African-American come up to me in court or after court, and they'll just be shocked that I even exist. You know, they look at me as if that thing I see walking up and talking to the judge is an impossibility, and it's scary to me because it shouldn't be that way. I mean, I've had 40-year-old men, grown men. Wow, I've never, and it's disturbing in a way that troubles me. Because I don't believe that they couldn't envision themselves in that role of leadership and whatever it is. And I've talked to Dr. Brown about this. He gets the same reaction, like, oh my God, you're in this position. How is that even possible? What I try and do is, I serve on the board. We have a foster child. I coach kids. I mean, if you walk around with me, there's a group of kids that I've been coaching, and I'm a horrible basketball player, by the way, but don't tell them because, yeah, exactly. Another stereotype down. But this group of kids, I know them, and that's one of the joys of serving on the board, is that I connect with kids that I actually know, and that's, you talk about preventing this endangered species model, that's what I try and do, and that's why I'm so excited about the potential of this role, is that that public leadership role is so critical for so many of our kids from all backgrounds. I mean, the cool thing is my truck driving background is going to bring a whole set of rural kids into that. How many judges can drive a tractor trailer? How many judges were former Teamsters? So making those connections with people, that's how I approach it, and just try and engage and be involved, like I said before.
Can you comment on the police department with issues in terms of like profiling, arrests, just the structural racism in the police department? I'll give an example. We had guests over at our house. I live on South Side, and there was about 10 of my husband's friends who came over, and they're all black men. And the police knocked on my door. We weren't making noise. We were watching a boxing match. We weren't drinking outside. There was no reason to knock on our door. They knocked on our door and asked us, "What are you doing in your home? Why are all these people coming in your home?" So things like this happen on a regular basis in my area. I'm just wondering, how do you deal with these issues?
Well, when you're a defense attorney, and so let's say there's no basis for an arrest, you have to make sure that you defend your client's rights. There was no reasonable basis for the police to be there, etc. When you're a judge, I mean, in your case, no one was arrested. I mean, the question is, why did the police come? Maybe someone called and alleged something. I don't know. Okay, it's inexplicable. I mean, I don't, but when you're a judge, you're not going to, in other words, you don't as a judge hear about that problem. You just have to make sure that when the people are in front of you and they're a party, that you're not prejudging the case just because what you've heard, maybe some allegation, whatever the allegation is, you have to make sure you're coming in without that bias.
I'm just wondering if and how you can influence that department, that area.
So I'll be simple. As an attorney, I sue IPD. a situation like that. I find a case and we prosecute it and we bring whether it's a federal 1983 action or if there's some other type of violation, you bring it and you hold them accountable. That's an extremely difficult job, and without that pushback of, hey, there are rules here. I mean, when you're an officer, you have this immense amount of discretion, and without that check in place of, hey, that citizen who you may have violated their rights can come back at you. You want officers thinking about that. You don't want the free rein. So for me, it's simple. As an attorney, when there's a case involving some type of abuse, you prosecute that case. As judge, if you're hearing that type of case, you listen to the facts, you listen to the evidence, and you follow the law,
So Seth, what's the mechanism for people to report police abuse? Like where would she go?
The city, I know, has a civilian complaint review board, and you can file a complaint with them. In fact, that was the big controversy when Gino Bush was removed from that. So that there may be some issues or concerns about the legitimacy of that body, but that's one avenue to go. The other avenue is to contact an attorney and file a claim if the attorney will take your case. So I mean, it's a long, drawn-out process. It's not easy. It's not easy for the attorney. It's not easy for the person, suing. But your rights are real, and that Constitution that we all talk about is real, and that's where it gets enforced.
If there's a consciousness, or if you will have a consciousness about these sort of actions that happen by the police department, in terms of sitting in your seat, because quite often I would consider you on the same side as these officers.
Right.
And so there's I guess I'm wondering if you see those connections and how you feel.
It is very unfortunate that we are at a place in our society where the judge is seen on the same side as the police officer, because the judge really has to be fair. And and I think we've all kind of touched on it, that you have to know that it is possible that people are being racially profiled, that it happens, and it's out there. And when you're analyzing a case, and what you described doesn't come to court, so it doesn't come to the judge. But when you do have an arrest that comes out of something like that, and it was based on, an illegal search, the judge has to know that illegal searches happen, and, profiling is not a reasonable cause to enter someone's home, and, and that's when you apply the Constitution and throw out the charge. But it saddens me. I respect and understand that you and probably many other people in this court see the court system as an arm of the police, but that's not the way this country was founded, and that's not the way that it should be, and that's a real problem for our society, that once the court is seen as unfair, is seen as favoring the police or the government in any way, that's a real breakdown in our society.
Okay, so what can be done about it?
Well, in addition,
how can we change the perception in the community, or how can we actually change the reality?
Well, the reality is to elect good, fair judges, but I don't know how we change the perception. I don't.
But a way to move forward would be if we're talking about having regular meetings with members of the bar and the community so that issues like this are reported to us, it could then be brought to the proper attention of either the judges, the district attorney's office, the chief of police, so that we can try to enforce the issue of further education, because if they're missing the mark and they're knocking on your door because you had a number of black gentlemen come into your home, which is no reason to be knocking on your door in the first place, then education clearly needs to be had. And by reporting it to groups that then have a larger group behind them to support change, having these regular talks with the Bar Association is something we clearly need to start.
Let me turn the attention to the issue of colorblindness. Because I think one thing that happens in the criminal justice system is that the courts hide behind colorblindness when it serves them well, and claim that, the claims that were brought up before about there is no color blindness. Actually, we're prosecuting black people more than we're prosecuting white people. So it's like sometimes color blindness rules and sometimes color blindness doesn't exist. But this particular card says, courts continue to espouse a, quote, colorblind stance in their thinking and application of the law. For example, Zimmerman, how might the courts develop a more color-conscious, i.e. understanding of structural racism, in their interpretation and application of the law, especially when it comes to incarceration of people of color?
The judge has most of the most power in the sentencing phase of the criminal cases, and so that's where you actually have the ability to use your own understanding of, whatever pre-sentence investigation report you get, and your own understanding of, what the crime was, and what is the likelihood of the person being safe in the community, et cetera, and what resources are there. That's where you can really proactively, as a judge, do something about this. What everyone likes to think of justice as blind, but whether it truly is not just colorblind, but no preconceived notions. So if you're aware that there is a systemic result that's racist, then that's where you can most affect it in sentencing and probation and even parole as well.
Well, my hunch is that the claim of colorblindness is actually just a succumbing to one's own prejudices and not really colorblind at all. But any other comments about colorblindness?
I think I have more questions about colorblindness than comments, because, I think of Martin Luther King, and, we want people to be judged by the content of their character. And to me, I always thought that's what colorblindness meant. But obviously, it means different things now, and people have different perceptions of it. So I think I need to learn a little bit more about the concept of colorblindness versus color consciousness.
Yep. I just wanted to mention that I got a card that said that Nancy Zook chaired the Family Court Advisory Council for the last 10 years, and that their last meeting was in June, and that there's a name for more information. We can contact Dave Sanders of the County Youth Services Department. So I think we should follow up with that and see if that can be strengthened. So it feels like our numbers are thinning out and people are tired, and you're probably tired as well. We will follow up with all of the things that Lynn has been scribing, and that all the cards that have come into us. I really appreciate your candidness and your willingness to speak, and I want to invite you to continue this conversation with white allies against structural racism in whatever ways seem appropriate to you. Obviously, we have a lot of issues and ideas raised tonight, and I will make sure that the notes from this get sent to each of you individually with an invitation to join us.
And thank you.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for holding this forum, because we all need to continue learning in our lives, and no matter what role we play in our community, we're all members. And I personally want to be a member of this organization and continue no matter what my role is in the community in the future.
So, Caleb, you want to close us out?
So just to close us out, we want to thank Beverly J. Martin, White Allies Against Structural Racism. There's information in the back about this White Allies Against Structural Racism drop-in group that we have. We're encouraging people to join a talking circle with the Multicultural Resource Center. And thanks to all of you for coming out tonight.